Jared and Gary, it's fantastic to have you back for another season of the Midweek Tackle, of course, where you get all of the biggest news stories of tomorrow right here tonight. And we've got plenty for you right here at the desk. I'm joined by Corbin Middlemas and John Ralph. And Ralphie, we've got a big breaking story about some off-season arrests at Hawthorn. You've spoken to the club tonight.
That's right. So Dylan Moore getting drunk and climbing on a scissor lift when he was having some pre-season training in the American off-season would normally just be another example of players behaving badly in America. He and Connor McDonald were charged with trespass. Moore was then stripped of the vice-captaincy. He was fined by Hawthorn. But there are a couple of complicating layers to this one. So Hawthorn chose to keep this one under wraps to most of their players and certainly their members until it was exposed tonight. And Moore was initially hit with a drug paraphernalia charge, which was then dismissed. So, Corbin, let's go through it. Let's start with the club concealing this issue. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, they missed a trick big time. I mean, there was an opportunity in November or December or whatever it turned out to be to put this story out. And you can imagine, say, for example, if it's on the same night of a test match or whatever it turns out to be during an Ashes series where there's great interest. And I'm sure we certainly wouldn't be talking about it between games. And there's even a great comparison here to the way Richmond dealt with McKelty-Lafau, which was swift. And I guarantee you there's no one at Tigerland answering questions today about McKelty-Lafau's incident before their first game of the year.
So there's no putting out the trash in round one. So the Hawthorn view on this one is that both players had those trespass charges, which they need to address in coming months. They've completed an alcoholic seminar, and so potentially those charges will be not dismissed, but they'll be able to move through those quite quickly. But they knew that as they dragged on, they didn't really want them to impact on their mental health. The funny issue is that this has now been seen as a burden off Moore's shoulders. He was really actually battling with it, so it's probably been a positive for him. So the drug paraphernalia charge is part of the AFL's slippery slope. So he was not charged with drug use. The paraphernalia charge has now been dropped. We must be really specific about that one, so we don't know the details of that one. But broadly, the AFL's illicit drug code does not kick in the off-season. Players are hair tested if there are positive results in regards to that one. Then they're target tested across the season, so who knows what will happen there. So he loses the leadership position, he gets fined the community service. It's a big price, but I think it's a very fair price for Dylan Moore.
It is an interesting one. They'll be back at the club tomorrow. I know there's a training session. Sam Mitchell's set to have his press conference, but just a little bit of a murky one, wasn't it, with how it played out? My understanding was that there was a bit of a rushed Zoom meeting late today when the news of the story was about to break. So some players obviously only finding out in the hour in the lead up to the story breaking. So it is an interesting one, isn't it? And I guess raises questions about how clubs handle these things. Now, here we were thinking that the biggest story we were going to be talking about out of this game on Friday night was going to be Zach Merrett, of course, the Essendon former captain, facing the side he was trying to get to, if you can sort of make sense of that. There was so much that played out, so much drama, John, at the end of last season. You've gone inside that failed trade.
Yeah, that's right. So Zach Merrett and Brad Scott have made a binding pact. They will talk about every single issue that is of concern to either of them absolutely immediately. So as this season was going to hell in a handbasket, the issue was that Zach just didn't feel like he could come forward and vent about how tough he had it and how he wanted to play finals and all those things when they have 20 injuries and when their sports and nutrition issues were absolutely disastrous. So right now they speak daily. The relationship is as strong as it's ever been. I think it guarantees absolutely nothing in regards to his future with his football club. They're coming from a long way back because Merrett and his wife had a dinner with Brad and his wife and Craig Voslo, the club's CEO. It was a couple of days before his meeting with Sam Mitchell, and I think he was explicit, I want out. His wife was even more explicit. He wants out. He made that very clear. So then a day later, after his meeting with Hawthorn, Brad Scott comes on AFL 360 and says, we're blindsided, we have no idea what's Sam Mitchell doing. As Merrett later said, I had that conversation with him. It was the hardest conversation of my life to tell him I wanted out. But suddenly Merrett's painted as this person who's deceiving the club, who's blindsiding them. He's public enemy number one. So it was a relationship that very much needed rebuilding, but right now it's on as firm a footing as it could be.
What about his agent, Tom Petroro, or his now former agent? I'm sure that'll be a storyline that'll be discussed as we get closer to the game.
We've all seen the footage, and it was pretty dramatic footage, wasn't it, as he demanded everything. He demanded 4 first-round picks, as it turned out, from Hawthorn. They were never going to do that. That's the question. Did he get punished, Tom Petroro? The answer is very much no. So his new manager, Nick Geeshan's actually his old manager. He managed his brother, Jackson, and him as well for the first 8 years of his career. He moved management firms. When the trade didn't go down, everything changed. He went back to the guy he started his career with. Now, what now? He's very much open to seeing how this season plays out. They've offered some kind of early initiation of a contract. I'd be very surprised if he signed that one early. If they are pushing towards finals, maybe that's something he'll consider. He'll actually make more money at Essendon than he would have at Hawthorn if he'd moved on. He trained a lot with Christian Petracca over the summer. And I think he'd be really aware of how revitalised he is. He would have seen how well Christian played across the weekend. So, look, he'll be 31 by the trade period. I think if Essendon can't show it's on the way towards a premiership, 13 seasons, 3 elimination finals in which he's been smashed in every one, I think we would still see where this one was going. He was fantastic on AFL 360 before, but talked about how crestfallen he was as Christian's trade went through, as Charlie Curnow's trade went through. He was left, unfortunately, having to go back to Essendon.
Well, there's 3 parties to every trade, right? There's the club you're going to, the club you're coming from, and the player side, which involves obviously the player agent. I would have thought out of everyone involved in that process, the player agent would almost be the guy that you blame the least, wouldn't it? So it makes sense what you're saying as to how that all came about. I mean, at the end of the day, he's almost helpless in that scenario. He can push as much as he wants, but if Hawthorn don't stump up a little bit more, he ultimately doesn't get there, and his Essendon don't settle or perhaps take unders, he remains. And ultimately, that's what we saw. Hawthorn didn't come up with a deal that blew Essendon away, and ultimately the Bombers did what they always said they were going to do, and they held him to his contract.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think Hawthorn would be a little bit scarred, and they would realise how hard it is now to deal with the Essendon Football Club. And so he's 31. They'll be looking for younger players. They'll be looking for free agents, but it doesn't mean that if things go pear-shaped, there won't be a lot of clubs out there that would say Zach Merrett's still a player of high demand for us.
Makes you wonder what he's worth when you know he wants out.
You've spoken, Loz, to the games record holder today, the man that's coached more games than anyone else in the history of AFL, VFL footy, about a man who used to coach.
I have. Of course, all eyes on Carlton. Now, I've spoken to Mick Malthouse regarding this Sam Docherty drama. So news broke this morning that he had been effectively banned from attending a function at the ground on Thursday night. Now, Mick Malthouse in, I guess, 2 hats, really, both as a former Carlton coach who used to coach Sam Docherty and as the player who has managed more players out of their clubs. Feels like this is a bit of a tit-for-tat moment from Carlton, as if the one wrong from Sam Docherty has then prompted another wrong, John, by, I guess, banning him from this function. So he doesn't really feel like that this was the right way for the club to manage this situation. The Blues would argue that it was just awkward timing, that they'd really like to take the sting out of it, keep Sam away from that function on Thursday. He'll return in that official capacity for the Peter Mac Cup. So, I mean, it's a little bit, you could argue both sides of this one, right? But I would have to say Mick Malthouse was really, really strong on this and really felt like both sides are in the wrong here, but the way that Carlton has handled it is probably wrong. I went to Sam Docherty today to seek comment from him. Naturally, it's been a big few days in the headlines for him. He was quite happy to politely decline, which I think you can understand in this scenario, but there's really no winners, is there?
I think Graham Wright's completely got this one wrong. I think he's an elite football executive, and we know from his premiership experience. But if there was a media management strategy to turn this from a 2-day story into a full 7-day story, leading right into this huge clash against Richmond, this was it. They talked across the weekend privately. Let's not turn small issues into large festering issues. This one right now is a weeping sore. Again, he'll make many fantastic decisions, but I just thought here, you welcome him back in, you say you're a valued member of our team, former and past, and we move on.
Well, that's right. He's endured so much on and off the field for the club. He's a former captain. I think in this scenario, if he fronts up to that function on Thursday night, he makes his feelings clear, he gives more context to the comments. All it's going to result in now is that the room that he was supposed to be in, it's all they're going to be talking about without him in the room. So I think it does go to question how you manage this sort of thing. Now, all eyes, of course, have been on the tribunal as well tonight, Corbin. Darcy Gardner is done. Harris Andrews is ongoing. Tell us the latest.
Yeah, so 1-week ban for Darcy Gardner upheld. So they did their best to try and argue that it was a push rather than a strike. Tribunal didn't agree. And you can make your own mind up looking at that vision, that ultimately they decided the 1-week sanction fits. And as a result, he won't be available to play the Sydney Swans this week. They're already depleted, obviously, with no Harris Andrews. You think on top of that, Hugh McCluggage obviously is missing, so one of their co-captains. Good thing they've got 3 captains. They're going to need the third of them this weekend in Josh Dunkley to lead the team. A bunch of other injuries on top of that. Zach Bailey suspended, so all of a sudden it's a battle of attrition early in the new season for the reigning premiers.
I've spoken to the Bulldogs today. John Artie Jones, of course, the victim in the Harris Andrews incident. He was at the club today. There's no permanent or sort of more physical damage to that cheekbone, as ugly as it did look in the moment. But what are your thoughts on that one?
So about an hour of testimony from Harris Andrews. He says that it's a shepherd. Doesn't matter. If you choose to initiate contact here and you knock a player out, if it's a shepherd, it's a bump, whatever it is, that's a 3-week penalty. The new AFL rules that potentially mitigate that down to 2 weeks, they are not to be used in this scenario. They're very, very rare and very thin parameters. It's a 3-week ban. Maybe he'll get off, as Joe Newcombe was very lucky last week, and of course the AFL considered appealing it. it's 3 weeks and he should serve the 3.
Yeah, the Tribunal, of course, still deliberating. So if we do get an outcome during the show, we'll bring it straight to you. They'll be looking to set a standard on that one. And speaking of setting a standard, Corbin, you've got an update on the punishment for homophobia in the game. What's the latest on that?
So Collingwood play Adelaide this week. Of course, the last time that they met, there was that really ugly undertone to the qualifying final that was played in Adelaide. I think it's fair to say after the Rankin incident, there were no winners in all of that. Yeah, it wasn't good for Isaac Rankin, wasn't good for Adelaide fans, wasn't good for the gay community. And so what would happen, I guess, this year if the same set of circumstances repeat? I'm told that the same process is essentially in place. So it will be a case-by-case basis judged by the integrity unit. And then the AFL will determine the penalty from that point on. Now, what is different on this front is that Tom Harley is now in charge of the division that's going to lead that. So he's got that portfolio at AFL House. And the other thing is, as much as we've heard from AFL officials, really going back to 2024 in particular, when some of these penalties came down, and the messaging was very much at that stage, hey, they'll keep getting more and more severe. My understanding is, although the AFL haven't said this publicly, that the baseline is 5. So even when we looked at some of those previous occurrences and previous suspensions for homophobia, you could see they jumped around a bit. I mean, Alistair Clarkson got a fine, but in terms of players, the floor's 3, the ceiling's 6 for an incident in the VFL involving Lance Collard, which involved multiple slurs. So as a result, 5 is really the starting point. So if you're going to use that language on the weekend, you can expect 5 as an absolute base.
That is a bloody long list across 2 years. So I would have thought we would have seen the biggest anti-homophobia education program that this game has ever seen, whether it's through the AFLPA or the AFL driving. My understanding is we're still at the online module stage where you go through and you share some questions across WhatsApp, some answers, as you said before. You tick the box and you move on. If we get another incident early in this season, I think the AFL would want to be saying we did everything possible to try and educate the players. I don't think that's happened right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll keep a very close eye on that throughout the season. Now we're in debrief mode from opening round. Corbin, it was expanded to Victoria this year, of course, but growing the game in the northern states has been the point of this the entire time. Now, you've got some numbers that are pretty concerning out of Western Sydney. Yeah,
so northern states responsible for more than 50% of the population and only 14% of the playing cohort from Queensland and New South Wales. But for GWS in their 15th year, these are some numbers that are actually comparable to their first season and goes to show what the challenge that they're facing is in Western Sydney. So these are under-13s boys registered in Western Sydney, and you can see that the numbers, how they dwindle in recent years. So there's a number of reasons for that. One is post-COVID. The other one is the Penrith Panthers' dominance and really investment into that area to get boys playing. So 166 just 3 years ago, all the way down to 87. That's just 87 boys playing the game in Western Sydney in the Giants catchment area, currently participating. So if we extrapolate that out, what that means for a club like GWS when it comes to participation, and our friend Dwayne Russell, this is almost like his radio show, you call, you get on. It's a little bit like you play, you make the Giants Academy. So these are the numbers at the moment. So in the under-12s, there's 120 registered boys playing the game. 50 of them are in the academy, and it's more dramatic once you get to the under-14. So half. So literally every second person that registers in Western Sydney will make it into the academy as a result. There are positive numbers shown for the broader New South Wales area, places like the eastern suburbs and the North Shore, and the AFL put out last week the participation rate up to 78,000, which is up 10%. But it's Western Sydney in particular that is the most concerning. I spoke to AFL New South Wales today, and they told me that they presented to the AFL Commission last week. So the Commission have heard a presentation in recent days, and that the reports are the Commission has endorsed that strategy. So on the back of those exclusive numbers tonight, they've endorsed a strategy into Western Sydney. And now the next bit is AFL New South Wales will go back to the Commission early next month and work out what that funding model looks like from here. But essentially, if you're wondering why the push is on for Western Sydney and why it's so important, those raw numbers tell a pretty significant story.
It's not a raw number, it's a terrifying number for the AFL. We understand how much money they've invested in it, but to think that that number, after 15 years, we will never get a junior pipeline coming through there that has any real impact on Greater Western Sydney, that's scary. And
it raises questions too, John, about their academy and their father-son picks. I know the fight's on there.
Yeah, they're pushing back really hard. So what GWS would like is unfettered access to the academies in Western Sydney. They're also pushing back just across the state in regards to the academies there. So they played Hawthorn on the weekend. Hawthorn had 70% of their players on their list from Victoria. GWS had 27. So that runs into salary cap issues when you're trying to bring players up, and you're also, of course, trying to keep players as well. So the AFL is about to release those specifics in regard to academies and those new rules. So what we will have is we'll have a club's only allowed to match a very high bid with 2 picks. They used to be able to say, we want pick 20, 30, 33, 34, 35, accumulate all of these picks, and now there'll be 2 picks. And they're also saying that we will scrap the discount. So you used to be able to get a 20% discount, now it's 10, it'll be 0. Let's give you an equation for Cody Walker, who Carlton fans obviously are desperate to try and get to their club. So right now they might need 3,000 points, no discount. It's pretty much the equivalent of 2 pick 7s. That's about 3,000 points. So maybe you need pick 6 and pick 8. Maybe you need 5 and 9. As someone said to me, if you're a club that finishes top 4 and you're trying to match a bid for a bottom 4 player or a player in the top 4 in the draft, it's almost not going to be able to. It's almost impossible. So I think that's about right. Spend all the money on the academies, pump all these kids into the draft, and if it is that you can't have them and they go into the open draft, well, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Thoughts? I mean, there's numbers flying everywhere, but it seems to make sense.
I really like it. Yeah. I feel like that most people, you put your finger in the wind, I think they'd be relatively comfortable with that. The part that doesn't sit right, as you say, is, here's a bunch of 5th and 4th rounders that may never get used. And by the way, we've got one of the next Ashcroft brother or whatever it turns out to be walking the door. So I think people can get used to that. And the other thing is it's going to force those clubs to be aggressive in the trade period to go and collate the picks that they need. And as you said, that might mean instead of getting 4 players, they might get 1. And it goes to show, how much do you really want that particular player?
Yeah, and if you want a superstar player, you might have your first pick. You have to trade out one of your quality players, and then you bring in a 18-year-old with 15 years of service. Now, Lauren, your daily commute takes you past Dingley, the Kennedy Centre there at Hawthorn. What the hell's going on at Hawthorn?
It does. I've been making calls on this one for a few weeks now, Ralphie, and I can tell you tonight that investigations are underway at Hawthorn on a wind mitigation strategy at the Kennedy Community Centre. So obviously it's set above there. I got it right once. I'm not going to risk it again. But I can tell you that they're looking at a few different options, including some high-density netting. Now, let me explain this to you. It's sort of some high poles with a thick sort of shade cloth material. So I've spoken to people that have used this in sports fields, particularly on tennis courts. We often see it, and in agriculture as well, to protect crops from high winds. Now, this material can reduce winds by 50, even some say more than 70%. Now, there could naturally be quite a high cost involved. Someone put to me today that it could be as much as $500,000. But we know how much the wind has affected training out there, particularly when they first moved. Now, it's been quite nice for the last few weeks, and Sam Mitchell, maybe the ban about not talking about the wind has been lifted a little bit. He admitted himself that those first few weeks out there had him concerned, but it's certainly something that they're looking at. I don't think a wall as such is something that would work. Obviously, Moorabbin Airport is nearby as well, so height needs to be a consideration, but I can certainly tell you that they're looking at it now.
This is hilarious, isn't it? So you don't buy 28 hectares of land in Brighton for $7.5 million, and so they go out to Dingley. The land was bought and they went through 2 years of testing there. There was a lot. It was landfill, basically, household landfill. It was dumped legally through EPA provisions. So the irony is when they buy this 28 hectares off the Dinsan nursery, they got a $250,000 tree credit. Dinsan says, come in, 250 grand worth of stock. So they used it, but not on a windbreak, maybe to beautify the place. Of course, it was pretty barren out there as well. So the Dogs don't give a stuff about the wind at Whitten Oval. They think that it adds to precision of training and foot skills and all those kind of things. Sam Mitchell does sweat the small stuff, doesn't he? I just wonder if it's going to get into their heads and then just snowball, and every kick they miss, it's because of that bloody wind.
I love that we're 18 minutes into the first show of the year and we got wind mitigation strategy out. I feel like it's not going to be the last. We'll be talking about this, I'm sure, as the year progresses.
We will all year, because they want to play AFLW there too, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Now, plenty more to come after the break here on the Midweek Tackle. Of course, NFL is set to descend on the MCG later this year, but they're already here. They are at the MCG. And we'll tell you more about it right after this. We'll see you soon. Well, it all starts tomorrow night. Brand new Motor Racing 360. The appetite is strong after the Melbourne GP, and it all kicks off at 7:30 on Channel 506, covering the biggest news across supercars, Formula One, and of course the MotoGP. Hosted by Jess Yates and Paul Murray, featuring Mark Skaife, James Phelps, and Ethan Fleetwood. Absolutely can't wait for that. But boys, all eyes are going to be on the MCG come September. Of course, not only for AFL finals, but the NFL season opener between the LA Rams and the San Francisco 49ers. They're set to descend on Melbourne, and I can tell you that a 60-strong contingent from the NFL are at the MCG for the entirety of this week. They are looking at everything that our great stadium has to offer, from food and beverage to more hospitality, venue operations, and the activation options, I suppose you could call it, around Yarra Park. So they're going to run the rule over all of it and then have a front row seat for Carlton versus Richmond, Ralphie, which I know you will also be at. I think it's great to see them down here seeing what they can make of it.
I'm still paying off my beers from the 2018 Super Bowl. Amazing game, very, very expensive for US prices. So I think the MCC view is that we might get a locked-in date as early as next week. So, of course, the Super Bowl, the finals won't come out until then. The full fixture won't come out until then. But given, of course, massive demand, international sales as well, we might see that in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift style. 200,000 people on the waiting list. It's going to be great. Going to be some people missing out, so this has to turn into an annual event.
Well, the Yarra Park area is perfect for a big tailgate, so maybe people can go and hang out there. And
Buffalo style.
I'm sure they'd be happy to see that in their reconnaissance mission.
It'll be huge. Logistical nightmare, daydream for the AFL. They could turn the ground around within 24 hours for a final. They're confident on that, so plenty to keep an eye on there. Of course, on the contract front, Ralphie, you didn't think you were getting away without talking some trade. Give us the latest.
Let's rip through them. So contract year Jake is real. Jake Stringer has twice kicked more than 40 goals in the last decade. They were both contract years. So this year his contract will see him earn about $500,000. He's got a good base component, but also triggers in it as well. He hasn't got a trigger for 2027. He's just got the incentives. The Giants love him. They keep saying, he was incredible last year, a couple of soft tissue injuries. He's so selfless. He's bought into the culture. It would take a long-term injury for him not to ever consider going on next year. And I think he'll play well into his 30s there. Joel Amati, absolutely desperate to stay at the Swans, but he's a free agent. He's one of the few key position players on the market, and rivals are queuing up for him. So the Swans put in a modest offer last year. That was rebuffed. He didn't have a great year with his injury last year, but kicked 40-odd the year before. So both parties happy to wait and see. In a really poor draft year or free agency year, I think it'll be interesting to see if clubs come really hard and if the offer is much more significant than Sydney. And then Riley Sanders wants to stay at the Dogs, not particularly interested in a return to Tasmania, but he's got a view that he wants to be a pure inside midfielder. He doesn't really want to be a half forward. Adelaide asked last year, they were knocked back. He was dropped for around 24. He was disappointed by that. Amazing in the pre-season and then was concussed. So does he get back into that side as a pure midfielder? Just a couple of ones for us to watch across the next 10 or 12 weeks.
Interesting to see what Luke Beveridge does there. I think everyone's a little bit not interested in returning to Tasmania until they see what, if he can produce that sort of stuff in the midfield, Ralphie, over the next 18 months or so, and then Tassie potentially come to the table. I mean, you can't entirely rule it out, can you?
Yeah, he could sign a 2-year deal at the end of 2028, and then, of course, they'll have access to these uncontracted players and the big sign-on bonus as well. But if you give up 10, 17 in the future first rounder for Riley Sanders, he's your succession plan for Bontempelli and for Treloar and Libra as well. You'd imagine the Dogs will play a pretty hard bargaining trying to keep their star player.
10 teams play finals this year. It means we've got a wild card weekend, which is where the old pre-finals bye would be. And the AFLW lies want a piece of the action. Yeah,
I can tell you, Corbin, that there is a push on from players to hold a standalone double-header on that wildcard round weekend. Of course, the push for double-headers from the players has always been strong, but I think there's a prime opportunity there. It would fall in round 3 of the AFLW fixture as it stands at the moment. And there's an opportunity potentially with those wildcard rounds. They could be interstate. So hold the doubleheader at Marvel. You get footy in Melbourne and 2 games, no less, back-to-back. Great time to give it a real throw at the stumps and see how it goes. And vice versa too. If both of the wildcard games fall into Melbourne, maybe play it interstate at a stadium there. So the push is well and truly on there for more doubleheaders, more of those Category 1 stadiums from the players, particularly at the beginning of the season and in those overlap rounds. And a little bit of a shake-up too, Ralphie, in the pre-season that players are going to play up to 6 practice matches. So a little bit of a precursor with the AFL looking how things might look with more games of AFLW.
That's all great. Give me a State of Origin game. Give me an All-Star game. I want to see the absolute best. We saw how exciting that was for the AFL. For those of us who actually haven't seen these girls on a week-to-week basis, show them playing at their best, and then that trickles through to the AFLW season. That's
definitely the biggest thing we need to see. Australia-Ireland, of course, the front runner, that May to August, looking like the most likely window for that, I'm told. Now, of course, Harris Andrews' tribunal case is ongoing. It's time to get the latest now from David Zita in the newsroom. You've been keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah, look, they've just gone to deliberate, so it's been over an hour of evidence from Harris Andrews and then about half an hour of arguments from both sides, the AFL and the Brisbane Lions. The Lions trying to argue that this was a shepherd, this was not a reportable offence, and that when Harris Andrews went to put, as he's called it, a shepherd on, he wasn't aware that Artie Jones was as low as he was there with his body, and he couldn't have reasonably foreseen that a head contact could have occurred and obviously the resulting concussion. The other interesting tidbit here is there's a new ruling regarding impact in the AFL Tribunal guidelines, so the Lions trying to see if they can get it downgraded based on that too. But it's been a very lengthy hearing, very complex as they so often are, but at this stage I doubt Harris Andrews is going to have any luck, but we'll see what the Tribunal comes back with, hopefully not too long from now.
Thanks, David. A nervous wait for the co-captain Harris Andrews. Now, round one is out in full, and so is Supercoach this weekend. The banter has been flying in the Herald Sun office. We can't wait, so make sure you get in and pick your team ahead of what is set to be a huge round one of AFL footy. Fantastic to have you with us. Fantastic work by both of you, and we'll see you next time on the Midweek Tackle. Enjoy the footy.